where people and victims feel bad. Jeesoo talked about 그놈 목소리, which is another Korean movie, I'm sorry, Jack, where there were constant lawsuits by the victim family telling the producers not to disclose the information. Nevertheless, under our glorious democratic society, because of freedom of speech whatsoever, it was published. Think about the psychology, what the mental mindset that the families will feel. Think about it if it was in the perspective of your family, your mother, your little kid. Yes, NC.
Okay, if all the victims and victims' families don't want to be remembered, why there are a lot of victim families who are trying to get the justice, even though they knew they will be highlighted?
That's another point. That's the second point that I'm going to talk about, where you were expecting response. Let's look at justice, Madam Speaker. How is justice supposed to be served? Jeesoo already mentioned how sad of it is a society where they rely on the production of movie to recognize justice. I think that what we need to do, I'm not going to take any points, so sit down, you're heavy, okay? The purpose of justice is to work within the system. Now, if you look at cases like Dogani or 그놈 목소리 or all their multiple cases of heinous crimes, like I mentioned in my POI, first of all, they've already existed in the past. They're already punished in the past. They're either in jail, they're currently being investigated, or they're dead by death penalty or whatsoever. The justice system does work. You can't just come up and say justice will be served. Now look at Dogani case, if that's the only case that you want to use. What's happening right now? Because the legal system, after the statute of limitation, cannot prosecute these people, what's happening? More public distress, not towards the victims or whatsoever, but what? To the legal system. And we think that if you want to really solve problems, you try to fix that problem, not to characterize it in movies and hurt the feelings of people involved. Sit down. Now, we need to look at the clashes that came up in the debate. First, I think I'm going to talk about what we were trying to propose. Why the movie production or the movie industry is not fit for this particular case. Second, I'm going to talk about the role of the viewers, the role of victims involved, and the impact of how both sides will revolve around. And lastly, I'm going to talk about privacy and mice. We sit down. I'm not going to take any more POI, okay? Now, let's go with the beginning of the speech. Jeesoo talked about the uniqueness. Now, they, like NC style, no response on how producers, how the filming industries has multiple strategies, different stakeholders, investors that want to produce a movie that want public reception, how the possibility of openness for deception and changes and alterations from its original content exists. No response. Their response was, don't talk about Joker, Jeesoo. I don't like Joker whatsoever. If you want to talk about engagement, that's where you start engaging, Mr. Speaker. You did not also, Hyewon actually conceded. She was talking about over-sensationalization of how movies exist. That's what we don't want. That's the nature of movies. You want to excite, we want to sensationalize you through movies, but you need to answer the question, how do you sensationalize and excite people through movies? Not just showing me cutting your head off, it's depictions, alterations, that's what scenario writers and producers do. Make what existed look into a very fancy, decent things. And I think my previous speakers already done a quite good job talking about that. Let's look at the viewers and let's look at also the victims again. Now, let's say we allow this under their model, okay? Now, we introduce a movie that is based on a heinous crime. I think, in a large sense, like I've mentioned about, whether it's serial killing, or rape, okay, or underage rape, or both, or all together, we think that the public reception, yes, negative. Their reception would be, The only, except for the Dogani case, we think that it doesn't really compensate the victims. The main focus in this debate is the victims, Mr. Speaker. And it's not like Optimus Prime warning us that aliens will come and we'll start like publicizing the world that aliens will come. We're talking about real life people who will be hurt. And they're very irresponsible in considering that. Going back, the victims, Mr. Speaker, or Madam Speaker, or the audience, okay? You are potential. Well, I'm not saying you're potential victims, but I'm saying that everyone in society can be. That's the point here. And it's not something that we should fool around. When you're in the mindset of movie producers who wants to become billionaires, that's what they want to do. I think if you are considering what's real, that's not a policy that we should take. And we should keep that privacy up to their hands. It shouldn't be a display of mockery. Thank you.
Thank you, and lastly, we call upon the opposition whip to close this debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, and members of this House. Like, one of the things like this irresponsible government said was they kept on talking about like the idea of kind of like a statute of limitation, where they were talking about how this case was already closed 50 years ago. Like, this case was already closed, and blah blah blah. We think that's the exact problem. Like, why movies are made in our society, why movies regarding heinous crimes are made in our society. It is because it was, well, you can talk about the statute of limitations or whatnot, but then it was mainly because the justice system could not fulfill its purpose. Mainly because justice system could not punish the actual criminals that we already had in our society. That is why movie makers made these movies regarding like how justice wasn't served in our past, or even the status quo. And that's why people are outraged by the facts, outraged after when they're seeing the movies like Dogan, because they feel that justice system was never achieved back in our society. We think that's the core issue in our debates. We think they can't simply come up here and talk about like we already have our justice systems, and why do you have to like even like make them even more devilish and whatnot. We think we don't have a correct justice system. That's why victims are even more suffering from like wrong justice system. That's why there are movies. Before I move on to talk about like the two important issues in today's debates, I have like a lot of rebuttals. Basically, they came here from the very beginning and said like these movie makers are making monies. Like they're making monies. Like, yeah, we know. Like we think they are making monies, but then we don't really care as long as we clearly told you, there are good consequences that come from these movie makers' intention. We think movie makers' intention is not really an important part in this debate. We think the important part is what's the consequences after making these movies? What are the changes that are brought to our societies after these, like movie makers, like these money-sucking movie makers make these movies? We think that's the important issue we need to look at. Secondly, they said victims they're hurt twice and whatnot. We clearly told you from the very beginning that victims want their justice to be served. That's why they go to newspapers. That's why they go to documents to interview them. That's why even sometimes they interview with movie makers and published makers and whatnot. We think that clearly shows that victims do want their voices to be told. But moreover, I'm going to tell you later, we think even if there are cases where some victims don't want it, we think there are greater benefits in our motion. I'm going to explain later. Thirdly, moving on to how these ideas are distorted. We think there's a difference between distorting ideas, and we think there's a difference between presenting the actual facts. We think you can't really fabricate the actual true facts, because once movie makers do fabricate and distort the actual facts that are going on in society, we think people lose incentives to watch these movies, and just like that, just like they would say, if movie makers want to make money, they don't want people to lose interest in watching their movies. We think there's already check and balance systems. We don't really have to worry about distortion.
How would an interesting scene of your mother being raped in a depiction of a movie satisfy the victim? What positive consequence are you talking about?
Okay, I'm going to talk about later in our second issue. Throw something in me if I don't really. Okay. Firstly, let's look at two issues in today's debate. Firstly, about humanization. Why humanization is important and why it's not simply distortion. And secondly, about victims, and I'm going to talk about your PY. Firstly, regarding humanization. We think we clearly told you from the very beginning that through these movies we get to humanize these victims that are suffering in our society. We do this by, as the NC told you, because of a lot of things. Firstly, because the actors and actresses are someone I know. We feel more close to them when we see them being in the movies, when they see them being raped and killed and whatnot. We think we can humanize these people into so that we can feel more emotionally close to them. Secondly, and more importantly, which was never really dealt in this side of the house, was people do discuss about this. People really don't discuss about like, rape documents or like documents. They discuss about movies. They discuss about movies that are in our society. After watching movies, they discuss about, did you see the one? He's the son of a bitch. They discuss something like that. They don't talk about documents in their schools and their cafes. That was really clear. But we tell you why humanization is important. Firstly, because you emotionally move these people. Like what happens when you emotionally move these people is because these people tend to move toward like making justice system even more, just. Like we see clear cases like Togani. After that movie was made, a lot of people were claiming our government that you need to have a fair justice system. That is why after the movie Togani came out, the perpetrator even it was in the past, are being investigated and trying to be punished. We think that is the exact goal of these movies, and that's something good about it. Secondly, we told you like the problem is that in our society, there are internet and everything, whatnot. We have too many informations about too many crimes. We don't really feel like close about like a murder or rape that's going on. We told you that by humanization, you make these people more closer to you. You feel more outraged after seeing these movies because you feel more close to them. We think that is a positive effect that we're going to tell you, which they never really engage into. They never talked about how we already have too many informations that we don't analyze, and how these movies enable us to analyze these informations in a way that we serve our justice system. Secondly, moving on to victims and family. We think that fundamental burden of the government is they have to tell us why offending these families of victim is something that's more bad than actually providing better justice system in our society. We think they have to prove to us why. Thank you. We think they have to prove to us why offending these people is something that's so bad that we don't want our justice system happening in society. But NC clearly told you from his speech that people feel powerless because their justice system wasn't served. People feel powerless because their families or themselves were the victims of a criminal, whereas the criminals weren't really punished well. We think they feel powerless about this, but once we make this into a movie, once we humanize these people, and once people feel emotionally close to these people, like citizens in our society support these kind of minority victims. People in our society say to the government, to the public online, that we support this victim. We support these victims, and we will hate you. We will curse you, or we will say something bad about you, criminals, and whatnot. We think it's a clear benefit for that victims and their families. Moreover, we told you that when people do move in such circumstances, we change our legal systems. We do bring about justice in our system. Just like the movie that Hyewon talked about, like Kuno Moksiri or whatever. After that movie was made, our Korean law regarding child punishment was actually strengthened. We think it's a good thing because people made these achievements after watching these movies. We think there's nothing really bad about it. After all, ladies and gentlemen, at the end of the day, what you need to know about is you don't really have to care about whether these people are making money or not. All you have to care about is the consequences that these movies bring to you. Are the consequences something beneficial? We think it is, therefore we're very proud to oppose it. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we call up the five speakers for the opposition.
Ladies and gentlemen, I mean, the debate society is getting younger, right? All of you born in the 90s and all that. When you guys tell me, new is better, I never believe it. I never really trust that. But seeing the government side today, a former CA, a former champion, the current president of KIDA, completely deny the issue at hand and completely move away from the motion about the impact that movies exclusively have on our society. Maybe you guys are right. Newer is better, and this CAP is gonna, rock this tournament. But anyhow. This is where you're supposed to clap. So as the opposition reply, I have three clashes for you today. First, about the motivation or the creation of movies as a whole. What's so wrong or what's so good. Secondly, about the movies themselves. What exactly are they? What do they do? And thirdly, the most important part is the societal impact. At the end of the day, we have these movies. What happens? Right? First of all, creation of movies. All we really heard from the government side that it's money motivated, that it's a gross capitalistic value and whatnot. The opposition never denied. Yeah, I guess it's gross when people want to earn money. But at the end of the day, we tell you that movies, the creation of movies come from a background where people relate to a social injustice. When we see something that's not being solved, that's the issue that people focus on, and that's the issue people turn to. That was the very first argument coming from the leader of opposition. No response whatsoever. We told you that it's important to find what kind of social injustices people are interested in, because that's ultimately the catalyst of social change. Again, no response. So secondly, let's talk about movies. They tell us two things. Number one, facts are getting distorted because they need to be simplified in an hour and a half. And secondly, that you sympathize with villains. Now, first of all, about facts being distorted, Gunseob and NC already elaborated to you. Why, simply put, when you want to make money, you make it close to the reality as possible. You don't create princes and princesses in movies that you actually want to earn a lot of money in, unless it's a Disney movie. Now, we tell you that they also told you that if we're talking about cases that are closed anyhow, you need to make it like it was. You need to recreate that reality and hence have a blockbuster movie. We told you that distortion simply doesn't happen. But even if it does, even if distortion happens at the end of the day, we tell you that there are checks and balances in our society, that people don't undoubtedly believe what's in the movies, that people actually do refer to other media that they praise and love. We told you, and about villain sympathize, again guys, do I have to explain why relating to Zodiac is really bad? No, right? About sensationalization, we tell you that sensationalization is a good thing at the end of the day. That we say that when you're emotional, this is a motivation and inspiration for you to change the society that you live in. We tell you that discourse happens. We tell you that discussions happen. We tell you that laws are upturned and changed. We tell you that closed cases are open. All these actions arise when a movie is able to articulate and highlight a specific crime or specific incident. We tell you that documentaries are doing a great job, that media is doing a great job too. But at the end of the day, when we really think about what caused social changes, it was about the movie that was quite popular. It was the movie that had millions of viewers. So what happens? Our societal impacts, they tell us one thing, that victims are going to relive their crimes and hence it's horrible. We're not going to deny that every victim will be happy with the movies that are made about them. That's not the case. What we're telling you is that when we're weighing out ultimately the impacts this movie has, simply put, there are more positive outcomes. We were the ones who told you about movies and examples, and they were the ones who talked about Batman. We told you that with Kuno Moksori about an unsolved kidnapping case, child protection laws were strengthened in the Republic of Korea. We tell you that regarding Togani, although this issue was a book, you guys don't read nowadays, so after it was made into a movie, that's when people started reopening and investigating the case. That's the power of movies, and that's the power of cinema right there. We told you things like 대구리 소년들, about an unsolved case about a missing group of boys. We told you how that caused a discourse about the statute of limitations, about how against child crimes that we should open case unlimitedly. We on the opposition bench were the ones who told you about the impacts that movies had, the positive changes that our society saw. So at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, all you need to remember really is we have a movie, fine, it was created. What did it do? Did it cause a unique harm in the society that other things are causing? No. But did it cause a unique benefit that others can't, such as documentaries and newspapers? It did. So therefore, the opposition wins.
Thank you. Lastly, we call the reply speaker for the government to close the
I'll start my reply speech by stating again what I have clarified to the good lady and gentlemen. Shame on you. Shame. You do not come up here masquerading that you're going to sacrifice rape victims and kidnap children to protect rape victims and kidnap children. You don't come up here first saying that we're doing this also to help the victims and then suddenly flip by saying that who gives a damn about the victims as long as we did something good for society. Well, what good did you do to society? There's a question that you must still remember of the thought experiment that I gave you before. Is there a unique harm and unique benefit from the outcomes of this motion? Now, ladies and gentlemen, unless you're a psychopath, I think that everyone can agree, without the help of a movie, that rape and kidnapping and killing is bad. But there's only one medium mentioned in today's debate that they have openly has stated that will additionally harm the actual victims. Openly stated that of all the mediums, there will be one that will insult and harm and forevermore traumatize these people without their consent in many cases. And they say, damn with it. Because why? I'm making money. Sure, making money is not a problem. But when you go and cross the line, this gross, wicked act, where you eventually come up and say that, hello, we're making money. It happens to be that something nice happened sometimes. I could pray for Joe Pesci to do something, and it probably sometimes does something good. But just because he beats me on the head, demands me to go to the hospital for a CT scan, I find out later through that CT scan that I have a brain tumor and get it out in time, I do not necessarily go and thank Joe Pesci for beating me in the head. But that is the mentality that the opposition is giving you today. That is what you will have to fathom if you are going to raise the hand of the opposition. They say that we don't glorify bad guys. 살인했죠. Sorry again, Jan. 그놈 목소리. Who was the villain? Popular. Very nice looking man. Soft hat, soft voice. Who are the victims? Poor, innocent little children. By the way, has not been answered and still not have justified. Why is it that the actual victims, the real victims, hence the actual unique harm, where real people suffer simply because you thought that instead of making it fiction, you'll make more box office records if you say it's based on a true story. There you go. You still think that making money is okay? When the only reason that you chose that line of PR and that storyline is because you can make more money? Really? It's okay? Victims? Screw them. They probably got killed anyway. Is that the point that you're trying to make? Finally, I have one question that I'd really like to ask. Is our society that hopeless? Now that's a mentality of probably a Old Testament believer that before the Ten Commandments, that the Jewish people clearly didn't know that you shouldn't kill, you shouldn't rob, you shouldn't covet your neighbor's goods. If they really thought of that, and before in Mount Sinai that they didn't know that killing was bad innately from their hearts, I don't think they would have gotten that far. You see, the thing is, you don't necessarily need the unique benefits they talk about, that you will only be enraged with injustice and you will strive to change that injustice through proper means. It will only happen through our movie that you will buy the tickets for and make me rich. Unless you do that, you don't have a chance of redeeming yourself from a moral impurity. That's their case. That is their case. Now, are you that deficit of moral character, ladies and gentlemen? And is it more really justice when not all people of injustice, but the one with the most flashy and interesting story are the only ones eventually in the end, sadly, that gets reconciliation from justice? Is that the society that you would really call more benefit than harm? For these reasons, we are proud to propose.